What if, the moment you were diagnosed with a terminal illness, someone was already planning to steal from you? Not a stranger in the dark, not a hacker halfway across the world. Someone who knew your name, someone who knew your diagnosis, someone who sat across from you at a table, smiled, and handed you paperwork to sign. What you're about to hear is one of the most disturbing financial crimes the FBI has ever investigated. A scheme so calculated, so cold that it specifically targeted people who were dying, people who trusted the system, people who had weeks to live. And by the time anyone realized what was happening, over $50 million had vanished. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll discover isn't just a story about criminals. It's a warning about a hidden industry that still operates today. If this is the kind of truth most people never hear about, take 1 second to like and subscribe. Because by the time most people learn about this, it's already too late. Here's what makes this case unlike almost anything else in the history of financial crime. The people behind it didn't hack a bank. They didn't forge documents in some shadowy basement. They built something that looked completely legitimate. Something that was, on the surface, designed to help people. That's what made it so dangerous. Because when a crime hides inside a system built for compassion, it's almost impossible to see. The scale of this operation wasn't small. It touched hundreds of victims. It reached across multiple states. It involved legal professionals, financial intermediaries, and a network of people who all knew exactly what they were doing. And the people it targeted, they were in the final chapters of their lives. Some had weeks, some had days. They weren't looking for financial advice. They were looking for peace of mind. And the people behind this crime sold them exactly that, then took everything. This case sits at the intersection of two industries, life insurance and viatical settlements. If you've never heard that second term, you're not alone. Most people haven't, and that's exactly why the scheme worked. At its core, a viatical settlement is a financial transaction where someone with a terminal illness sells their life insurance policy to a third party for cash. The seller gets money now. The buyer collects the full death benefit later. In theory, it helps dying people access funds they desperately need. In theory. What happened here was something far darker, and the people who built this machine knew it from the start. On the outside, the operation looked like a legitimate financial services company. Polished offices, professional staff, marketing materials full of compassionate language, words like dignity, support, final wishes. They advertised in cancer centers. They placed pamphlets in hospice waiting rooms. They reached out to HIV/AIDS advocacy organizations at a time when that community was being devastated. To anyone looking in from the outside, this was a business that existed to help suffering people access the value of their life insurance policies before they died. And for investors, it looked like something else entirely. A guaranteed return. Because after all, the one certainty in life is death. Investors were pitched a product like this. You put in money. That money buys life insurance policies from terminally ill people. When those people die, and they will die, because they're already dying, you collect the death benefit. Your return is locked in. The only variable is timing. That was the pitch. But there were two massive problems hiding beneath the surface. One of them was financial fraud. The other, something darker still, Here's how it worked. Step 1. Brokers, some licensed, some not, fanned out across the country. They visited hospices. They attended support groups for terminally ill patients. They built relationships with caregivers, nurses, and social workers. Not out of compassion, out of prospecting. Step 2. They identified patients who had existing life insurance policies. The ideal candidate was someone with a terminal diagnosis and a large policy. The worse the prognosis, the more valuable the target. Someone with 6 months to live was worth more than someone with 3 years. Think about that. Step 3. They approach patients, often in their most vulnerable state, and offer them a cash payment in exchange for signing over their life insurance policy. The patient would receive a fraction of the policy's face value, sometimes 30 cents on the dollar, sometimes less. But they got the money now, and that's what these people needed. Money for medical bills, money for their families, money to die with some dignity. Step 4. Those policies were pooled and sold as investment products to outside investors. People who believed they were investing in something safe, something as certain as death itself. The company collected fees at every step. Acquisition fees, management fees, maintenance fees. Money flowing up the chain while dying people sign away their futures. At the bottom. But here's where it gets criminal. The company wasn't just charging excessive fees. They were lying about the medical records, about the life expectancy of the insured, about how the investor money was being used. Some policies had already lapsed. Some patients had been misrepresented as having months to live when they actually had years. And some investors' money wasn't even being used to buy policies. It was being used to pay earlier investors. That phrase should sound familiar, because what this operation had quietly become was a Ponzi scheme, built on the bodies of the dying. But that's not even the worst part, because the deeper investigators looked, the more they found. This wasn't just one company. This was an ecosystem. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the Viatical settlement industry had attracted dozens of operators, many of them operating outside the reach of regulators. In some cases, brokers were receiving kickbacks for every policy they brought in. In some cases, insurance policies were being fraudulently created specifically for this market. People were recruited, some of them in on the scheme, some of them not, to take out large life insurance policies with the intention of immediately selling them into the Viatical market. This practice, called stranger-originated life insurance, was illegal, but it was everywhere. And the investors? They were pouring in money from across the country. Retirees, pension funds, church groups, people who had been told this was a socially responsible investment. You're helping a dying person, and you're growing your savings. Everyone wins. Except, almost no one did. Have you ever trusted someone with your money, only to find out they were lying from the beginning? Or maybe you knew someone who was taken advantage of in their final days. Drop it in the comments below. You're not alone. The first crack came quietly, as it almost always does. An investor who hadn't received an expected payout started asking questions. Then another, then a third. They reached out to the company. They were given explanations, delays in processing, administrative backlogs, paperwork issues. But the excuses kept multiplying. And then one investor, a retired school teacher who had put in her life savings, hired a lawyer, That lawyer started pulling threads. And what he found unraveled everything. Policies that had been reported as active were lapsed. Patients listed as still living had been dead for months. Payments that should have flowed to investors had been redirected. He took what he found to state financial regulators. They broadened the FBI. And when federal investigators began mapping the network, the scale shocked even the most experienced agents on the case. We're not talking about one fraudulent company. We're talking about a web of interconnected entities, shell companies, nominee accounts, overseas transfers. The people at the top had seen this coming. Some had already started moving money out of reach. When the fallout hit, it hit hard. Over 500 investors lost money. Combined losses exceeded $50 million. Retirement accounts wiped out. Life savings gone. One couple, both in their 70s, lost everything they had saved over 40 years. They had to sell their home. And on the other side of the transaction, the dying people who had sold their policies, many of them never fully understood what they had signed. Some had been misled about the terms. Some had signed documents they didn't have the capacity to properly review. Their families, still grieving, discovered only later that the financial support their loved ones had been promised had been siphoned off in fees and fraud before it ever reached them. Several individuals at the top were convicted on multiple federal counts: wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering. Sentences range from several years to over a decade in federal prison. But the money? Most of it was never fully recovered. It had moved too many times, through too many accounts, across too many borders. And some of the architects of this scheme were never prosecuted at all. Here's what should keep you up at night. The Viatical settlement industry still exists in a reformed and regulated version. Yes, but the infrastructure that made this fraud possible, the vulnerability of terminally ill people, the appetite of investors for guaranteed returns, the gap between what salespeople say and what contracts actually contain, all of that still exists. And this isn't unique to Viatical settlements. Think about how many industries are built. People at their most vulnerable. Medical debt buyers, predatory reverse mortgage brokers, estate planning scammers who target the elderly. The pattern is always the same. Find someone who needs help. Offer them what looks like a lifeline. Bury the predation in paperwork and professionalism. The most effective financial crimes don't look like crimes. They look like services. They look like solutions. They look like someone finally giving you what you need. That's the lesson this case leaves behind. Not just the story of what happened, but the recognition that the conditions that allowed it to happen never fully went away. The next version of this scheme is probably already running. Somewhere, right now, wearing a different name, offering a different product, to people who are desperate enough to sign. Thank you for watching. If this opened your eyes, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps more people protect themselves. And check out the next video on your screen, because the story you just watched is far from the only one.